Hello and welcome to Members on the Mic with the Troy Chamber of Commerce, where we connect with Troy Chamber members as they give us a glimpse into their company and share some of the business lessons they've learned along the way. Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Thompson-Cusack, President and CEO of the Troy Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joined today by the amazing Sheila Denstead, our VP of the Chamber as well.
Hello, everyone.
First, I'd like to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor, Tryon Solutions. Stay tuned for the very first commercial break where you can learn how you can rely on Tryon. Hey, we've got a really great show lined up today. Sheila, why don't you introduce our first guest today?
Well, I would love to. Today we're meeting with Kristina Marshall, who is Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at Oakland Community College, aka OCC. She has many years of professional development, administrative, and teaching experience. She's a national speaker and a consultant focusing on cultural competency and how to address the needs of diverse populations. Kristina possesses a unique understanding of challenges facing educators, administrators, students, and organizations. Her straightforward, common-sense approach and practical strategies address improving dialogue, interaction, and understanding among students, faculty, staff, and administration. Kristina speaks from personal, classroom, and consulting experience. Her work is focused on building communities and helping to support inclusive workplaces. Welcome, Kristina.
Thank you.
Hi, Kristina. So thanks for joining us. As we talk about diversity and inclusion, I think it's always important that we start with the why. So why is it important for companies to start creating and implementing diversity and inclusion plans?
That's a great question. So diversity is really important for organizations because it increases profitability for the organization. It also allows the organization to meet the needs of their employees. There is studies that have shown that there is greater employee satisfaction and profitability in companies that engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion practices.
Yeah, as we talk, we say representation matters. It really does. And it's really interesting to say, like, while we always concentrate sometimes on it being about race, it's really about representing all of the community that you serve as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So when we look at DEI or DEIJ, what we're doing is ensuring that there is representation in your organization that reflects the society as a whole. Therefore, when it reflects society as a whole, it also brings in those diverse perspectives, those diverse experiences. And that's what makes your organization richer as a company, because you're then able to relate to more constituents or more clients.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, what advice would you give to a company that wants to start a DEI plan for their company, for their employees?
Great question.
We are nailing the questions.
You are, and I'm loving it. So what I would say is, number one, I would do a climate survey to see what the current climate is of your employees, and make sure that that climate survey is anonymous. So therefore, people feel free to speak. I would then say, as an organization, you would want to make sure that you figure out what your priorities are going to be. Priorities are going to be crucial. We know that DEIJ work is very tough work, it's hard work, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, but we know that it can be done, and we know that it's essential in order to improve the relationships, not only with your employees, but also the relationships with those in your community. So those are some very important things. So when you're prioritizing, figure out what it is that is going to be a short-term goal, and then what your long-term goals are going to be.
Well, and Kristina, one of the things that's interesting too is we talk about these DEI plans. There's a difference between large companies and small companies. A lot of times I see some of the smaller, like 3, 4, 5 people, employees, not really paying attention to it because they don't know what to do. You can't necessarily send a survey when you know how everyone will answer when you're a small team. But things like unconscious bias trainings, obviously those are things that we've been focusing on. What are some other things that some of the smaller teams can do to help improve that kind of culture within their own company?
So as a smaller company, you still want to have a place in which they can express how they're feeling while they're there. So regardless if it's a large company or if it's a small company, you still have to take the pulse of your employees. And your employees have to be able to feel free to speak how they feel. So that's important. The other thing is, for a smaller organization, while trainings are fantastic, you also want to make sure that you engage in things like maybe employment resource groups, which allows those employees to take ownership. That actually, once the employees formulate things like employment relations groups, then they also will be able to help with recruiting. They'll be able to help with different type of trainings that they feel that they need, and also just bringing in speakers. It will increase the satisfaction of your employees.
Yeah, 100%.
Wonderful.
Well, I was going to say, this might be a good time for a break, actually. So why don't we take a quick break and hear a word from our presenting sponsor, Trion Solutions. We'll be right back. See you soon.
Companies are competing for talent like never before. With the complexities of handling tasks like payroll, benefits administration, and other HR functions, it's easy to see how a professional employer organization like Trion Solutions makes all the difference. Trion empowers businesses of all sizes to attract and retain talent by offering access to top-tier healthcare and employee benefit plans. With Trion, you don't have to grow it alone. Visit RelyOnTrion.com.
You can always rely on Trion.
Welcome back to Members on the Mic with the Troy Chamber of Commerce. We are here with Kristina Marshall with OCC. Kristina, working to create a diverse and inclusive workplace is not the job of one person. It is the job of many, as you specified that. How do you get an entire organization, including some strong leadership, to move the needle, I guess, in this?
So number one, you want to make sure that this is part of your business plan. So this should not be something that is on the side. This is also something that is not done in a silo. And I am so appreciative that you emphasize that this is the work of the entire organization, not just one person. So in order to get everyone on board, number one, making it part of the business plan for the organization. You also want to ensure and make sure that there is some data that people can actually see. And there is growth. There is proven profitability in more diverse organizations. The other thing that you want to make sure, and how we get buy-in from everyone, is making sure that those voices are heard, that they have the opportunity to be listened to. And we know that a more diverse workplace is more reflective of the communities and the society that we serve.
Well, and I think that's the piece, too, that it's when we say it can't be just one person. There are so many instances that I hear of companies that are like, we have a diversity and inclusion officer. And I'm like, oh, what else are you working on? We have a diversity. And I'm like, no, that's not it's not one person. Like, how are these subcommittees built? How do you get the leadership to buy in? Like, I don't mean to say that in a weird way, but a lot of times we see people choosing like, oh, look, we have this bucket. Look, we're doing a good job. But how are you really going to do a good job? How are we moving that needle and getting people involved in the conversations?
So, of course, I'm going to tell you that having a diversity
You absolutely
person
should.
is a must.
I agree with that.
But I agree with you. One person alone cannot do this work. And so you have to actually work within every single department within your organization. So it should be part of your IT. It should be part of your HR. It should be part of every department within your organization. And so that person who is the lead champion, because we're all champions, you should all be champions, but the person who is the lead champion should be working within each department to help them make sure that they are meeting those goals of DEIJ throughout the department.
And I think investing the time makes sense. I think sometimes you'll see people say, well, okay, they got this. They got the department. It's good to go. But it's very important to have the leadership invest time in this as well. This cannot be something that goes to the back burner. This has to be something at the forefront, like you said, of a business plan, not a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. It's of the business.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, too, We do know that DEIJ or DEI is generally the first department to get cut.
Really?
It usually is one of those first things to get cut because they don't see the investment in this particular department. But I like to tell everyone it really is like the oxygen of someone's body, even though I'm not a medical person. and so I say it's the oxygen because we all know that we need oxygen to live. We need oxygen to survive. And that DEIJ department is the department that is working within every single department to ensure that those employees feel satisfied. If the employees don't feel satisfied, they're not going to stay. And you're going to have a very high attrition rate within your employees. We also know that the DEI or DEIJ is also helping to create those relationships with your customers, making sure that those customers are satisfied, making sure that the needs of your community are being met within your organization. Because generally, when you look at the director or the officer or the vice president, whatever title you want to give that DEI person, they generally have their pulse out there in the community.
Yeah.
And they also have it not only in your community, but in society as a whole, trying to make sure that that company continues to grow, trying to make sure that there is satisfaction with every employee within that organization. But we also have to realize that DEI is a tough topic for people. And so that leadership, so the organization itself has to realize that it's not going to always make them the happiest people in the world, because it's going to require sometimes to do some changes. And it's going to require there to be sometimes structural changes. But once those structural changes happen, they're done to improve that organization.
You're truly the ears of not only the business, but the community as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, I think that leads a perfect segue to my favorite and Tara's favorite topic right now. Did you know?
Ooh, what did you know are we going to learn about today?
Well, I have a feeling that Kristina might be part of this or know a little bit about this one. Did you know that the Troy Chamber is hosting a Diversity HR Summit that's presented by BOMA, and Kristina, as I mentioned, will be one of our panelists. This half-day summit will discuss how to build a strategic approach to a diverse and equitable workplace and how to foster an inclusive environment for our employees and steps one should take in building a business community free of racism and discrimination. Our Diversity Summit takes place on May 26th at Embassy Suites in Troy, and thanks to all of our amazing sponsors, we are able to offer this great event to our members at no cost. To register, go to www.troychamber.com.
Ooh, well, thanks, Sheila. That was a great Did You Know? And I know, and now you know too. So I do hope you can join us. Kristina, obviously, we are really excited about this event. We've done this event for a few years now, and it is one of the highlights of, actually, I would say, our calendar, because I personally, and I don't want to say we, I can't speak for everyone, but I personally really don't like going to diversity and inclusion events where there's no takeaways. It's just, and while listening is important, I like to see action. And I think that's a piece where we strive in this half-day summit of we want people to go back and have something to start the conversations, to get things going, and to make sure this isn't forgotten about. I mean, obviously, we're really excited about having you as one of our speakers. I think the first time we talked, there was so much joy coming out of you that I was like, oh, your energy matches me. I love you already. But why don't you tell our guests a little bit about what you'll be presenting at the summit?
So I'll be talking about implicit and unconscious bias in hiring practices and how to reduce some of those as you select new candidates and you're looking at hiring new individuals. The purpose of what I'll be talking about is trying to make sure that all candidates get an equal opportunity who meet the needs of your organization. And we don't want to talk about best fit. That's a whole nother thing that we will be discussing, okay, what best fit means and why that's not necessarily the best term to talk about the best fit. But we will be talking about implicit biases in those hiring practices. And we all have biases. And there's nothing to say that, one person has a bias, another one doesn't. what the point is understanding our biases and what we do with those biases and how we try to overcome some of the biases that we have. So we're making sure that we not only recognize our biases, but when we're looking to hire new individuals, that when we hire those new individuals, we're looking at them as their entire person and how they would be able to add to the organization themselves.
Yeah, and it's when you talk about that, obviously we're seeing some staffing issues and some hiring issues across the board. I hear all too often of somebody trying to hire somebody who thinks exactly like them, they'll fit in so perfectly because they are exactly like how I think. Well, that's the opposite. I mean, if you don't have the diverse thought, you're really just hiring and replicating yourself, and that's actually really not the best thing for business itself anyways.
Absolutely. But many times people do that because it's easier. Think about it. It's so much easier to hire someone that we know we would get along with other than taking the time to get to know people.
Yeah.
And we talk about that. I talk about that a lot. Taking that time initially to get to know your colleagues, making sure that everyone has that opportunity to be heard, making sure that you recognize each and every one of your employees. So in that hiring practice, you also want to make sure that when you're looking for candidates, you're looking for individuals who will add to the organization, not just candidates who are already like the individuals who are there, but people who will add.
I can tell you, if there was two of me's in the office, Sheila would lose her mind. So
I'm sure they feel the same way at OCC if there were two of me.
Okay, so now you have that great team you put together. You've looked at the value adds of everyone. You've incorporated them together. You have trainings now. You have trainings for yourself. You have them for your employees. Are you seeing the trainings working? How are they being perceived by the employees and the employers?
Absolutely. Trainings work when they are done purposefully and they are done strategically. So many times people would like to hire and do trainings where they get to click a button, right? And we all know, let's just be honest, many of the times you can probably get the answer without truly listening to the entire video.
yeah.
However, what trainings that tend to work best are those trainings in which people are able to engage. So even if that's online, it can be online, but a live online, a live Zoom, where there can actually be dialogue. And we also have to keep in mind that these are very sensitive subjects for individuals. And so therefore, as those sensitive subjects, you also want to make sure that your facilitator is skilled to make sure that they can answer those questions, but also understand where there's some more dialogue that needs to be had. So even though you may be there to do one training and you want to get through that material because that's important, you also have to read your audience to see what extra things that they may need, not just clicking through a PowerPoint to get it done, but to listen to the needs of those who are in the room. So do trainings work? Absolutely, trainings work. But you have to make sure that you get the right facilitator for what it is that your organization needs. And they have to listen.
I like the aspect of it's the old-fashioned eyeball accountability. If you can look them in the eyes, you're accountable in that session. So it's that, hey, if I'm having a personal conversation with you, as I'm doing this, like people don't know she's right next to me. As you have that, you're having accountability by really looking someone in the eyes and having that conversation instead of that click, click, click.
Absolutely.
And I found that very interesting with last year's session versus some of the other ones where we've been involved with. There was a lot of questions. There was a lot of dialogue. It was a lot of back and forth between our presenter and our audience, but then our audience and our audience. And I think there was really some great messages that came out of that from last year. So that's why I'm very excited about this year's. But now I have a question. This came up yesterday. Tara and I were talking. We were getting prepared for today. Your title at OCC is DEIJ officer. We know that stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. But my question is, and I'd like to understand better, and that's why I'm looking forward to May 26th. What is justice? How can we support justice? Tell us more about that justice aspect.
Justice has to do with the systemic problems that we as a society continue to face. And so when you look at the diversity, you're looking at the different perspectives and making sure that those different perspectives are being viewed, being heard, being acknowledged. When it comes to the inclusion piece, we're making sure that everyone feels like they belong, making sure that everyone feels that they are a part of that organization. Equity is not the same as equality, but equity is basically looking to ensure that everyone has what they need. And we know that those needs are not always the same. So therefore, that's why equity and equality are not the same, even though those terms are often misused as being synonymous terms, which they are not. But that justice piece looks at what are the systemic problems that continue to happen, and then how can we fix those systemic issues and problems that are happening in society and that are happening within our organization. We know that there are some internal and external systemic problems, whether they are related to race, whether they're related to gender, gender identity, gender expression, whether they are related to abilities, disabilities, etc. What we're trying to do with that justice and what we are doing with that justice is taking those barriers away, breaking down the barriers so that everyone can feel as though they belong, because that's important.
Thank you. I was so wondering. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's all we have today here on Members on the Mic with the Troy Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Kristina, so much for joining us. Obviously, if you want to see Kristina more or learn more from her, which I know everyone does, please make sure you come to the Diversity HR Summit that we'll be having. Go to troychamber.com to learn how you can register and join in. And that's all we have today. Thank you so much, Kristina.
Yes,
Is there any
thank
other thing
you.
you'd like to add?
Nope. I just hope to see everyone at the Diversity Summit. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to
very
learn
much.
more about the Troy Chamber or to come to any of these events, please go to troychamber.com. That's all we have here today at Members on the Mic. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Bye-bye.